Okay, hello everybody. My name is Martin and I run this YouTube channel called Taitset. Welcome to the 20,000 subscribers Q&A video. As you'll all know, I've never really done one of these before, and I normally haven't really made much of a deal of reaching milestones on the channel, but 20,000 is quite remarkable for a transport-focused Australian YouTube channel. There really are only a handful of channels that have passed that, so it is pretty amazing, and I'm very grateful for all the people watching, and I get a large amount of feedback every day from people saying how much they're enjoying the videos, so that's really fantastic. As I'm recording this today, the channel is on 21,217 subscribers, which, if to put that in some terms that Melburnians will understand, that's a little bit over a fifth of an MCG worth of people. And if you were all to arrive at that MCG on suburban train, it would take about 15 six-car Melbourne suburban trains to deliver you all there. Or if you all chose to drive, it'd be like close to 20,000 cars, and which wouldn't fit at the MCG. So there you go, just to put it in a little bit of perspective. And so first of all, thank you for everyone who sent in questions. There's a lot of them. I think there's about 130 questions. I will try and answer all of them. Some of them I will answer in groups because they're very similar questions. I'll have the same answer. If I do miss your question, it's probably not on purpose. It's probably more likely that I lost track of it in the fairly complex process of going through all this. So let's get started. I've sort of dragged these questions into some similar categories. So I thought we'd start off with a pretty basic one, which a few people asked, is where does my interest in rail transport come from? Which is a good question. And, it is an interest that's often inherited. A lot of people inherit it from a parent or something like that. Wasn't the case for me. There's nobody in my family involved in the railways at all. I think the closest connection was I had a great-grandfather who was a shunter in Bendigo Yard, but I never met him, so that's not the connection. It's a bit hard to pin down exactly where my interest in rail began, but I had a Duplo train set as a kid. I was very much into that, and in fact that train set is still in use today. I'm not really the main user of it anymore, but it is still operational. And then growing up, I certainly, I lived not that far from one of the world's best preserved narrow gauge railways, Puffing Billy. And we certainly made fairly regular trips over there. A lot of my early birthdays were at Puffing Billy. And then my good friend Alexander Jamison, who grew up around the corner from me. Many of you will know him as Melbourne Sparks on YouTube, who has G-Scale Garden Tramway. His family took him to a lot of tourist railways all around the state, so I started visiting some of the other tourist railways, and he also had some pretty basic HO scale stuff, and we sort of started getting interested in modelling. And then at about the sort of time where a lot of kids start losing interest in playing with trains, we just never stopped. And then in about 2002, the opportunity came up to go on some railfan tours, specifically ElecRail tours on the preserved Tate and Dogbox cars. And some of these trips we made with our parents in tow. We pretty quickly started doing it by ourselves. It all just snowballed from there, basically. So that was 20 years ago, and we just sort of haven't stopped talking and thinking about trains ever since. I suppose the other sort of the other angle of that is that I was sort of raised around a lot of people who were very interested in sort of environmental and social issues. So I was from a quite early stage, I was well aware of public transport's value to the community in that regard. So I was also quite interested in public transport as a function rather than just, being interested in trains. And if you look at the sort of railway enthusiast community as a whole, there are kind of like, there's a lot of different sort of factions, I guess, but they're, broadly speaking, there are people that are really passionate about the equipment, the trains, the infrastructure, that sort of thing, and there are people who tend to be more interested in the service and the operational side of it, and those sorts of people tend to be more interested in things like electric trains and trams and stuff like that. So I've kind of come at it from both angles, really. But as I've got older, I think I've become more interested in the sort of the actual public transport value of the system. Now there's a few slightly more specific questions in here that I'll have a look at. Scarlet565 says, can I do a video on tram operations, specifically how the points work? It's not something I know a huge amount myself, but Brendan, Shoney747 on YouTube, has made a video about that, and I will put a link to that down the bottom. In fact, there's probably going to be a few videos I'm going to recommend throughout this, so I will make a pinned comment down below to link all of those videos if you'd like to check them out. And I'd just like to say, any comments that you see that are coming up in white here are my supporters on Patreon. I didn't intentionally make them a different colour, that's just because I didn't have a dark mode turned on in the Patreon browser. But yeah, just so you know. Now, let's have a look. Future topics of interest. Pretty hard one to cover, but I've got a very long list of potential ideas for videos coming up. It's called ideas.txt, and I think pretty much all YouTubers have a document like that, and it's full of ideas that may or may not come into fruition. But I will come back to that a little bit later on and talk about some more specific things. What's better, tram or trains? Well, they're both good at different things, really, and sometimes, sort of a cross between the two, as you might see in a lot of places in Europe, is the best answer. But in terms of the ultimate form of transportation for moving a ton of people through a city, trains are incredible, but trams are much better at getting into the nooks and crannies of the city and providing a really frequent, if lower capacity, service. Yes, I did mention that some of the photos I started taking was when I was still in primary school. I was 11 when I started photographing trains on a regular basis. So that was a little bit over 20 years ago. And since then I've probably taken about over 200,000 photos of trains and trams. Okay, so moving on, another question that quite a few of you asked is, what is my job? Specifically, a lot of you asked, do I work within the transport industry? No, I don't work within the transport industry. I actually work in another industry that's quite relevant to producing videos, and that is the photography industry. So I did about 5 years working in photographic retail, selling cameras, got very thoroughly sick of dealing with customers, and now I work for a sort of smallish medium-sized company which is like a commercial photography company. I do a bit of photography for them, but I do a lot of editing, a lot of post-production, dealing with stuff behind the scenes in the office, a lot of printing, dealing with data, yes, retouching, all that sort of thing. So basically most of my work is on a computer, but doing photography related stuff, and really photography is my other big interest. One of my other big interests. I studied photography, and I have done a bit of professional photography as well here and there. But yes, I am in a pretty fortunate position that I have a permanent job in the photography industry, which is very rare. I actually work part-time because I'm also a father of 2 young children who are preschool age. So my partner and I sort of take turns working and then being with the kids. So really I'm a part-time employee and part-time stay-at-home dad, which is what I really enjoy doing. So as for why I don't work in the rail industry, it's not that I wouldn't, and I'd certainly keep it open as an option in the future, but I think part of it I just, I enjoy having it as a hobby, and I think sometimes it's best to keep your hobby just a hobby. But also, I'm not the sort of person who can work full-time, partly because I want to be with my kids, but also I'm just not someone who has a lot of energy for for that kind of thing. And there are very few part-time jobs in the transport industry, but also shift work. There's no way I can do shift work. I occasionally do like pretty early starts in my current job. If we're going out on a shoot somewhere, I can't keep it up more than a few days in a row. So in another life, I would have loved to have been a train driver. I think it's an amazing job, but no way I could do the shift work, unfortunately. But I am pretty happy with what I am doing at the moment. And and then I'm, in a sort of amateur capacity, I'm sort of doing some transport-related work by making these videos, so that's kind of fun too. So another thing I should address is a couple of people have asked specifically if I don't work in the transport industry, how come I have a bit of footage from drivers' cabs of trains? So yes, no, I don't work in the industry. I am not allowed to be in the cab of a train. There's actually only a handful of bits of footage that I've got actually taken from a driver's cab, and those are ones where people who are allowed to be there kindly took my camera on a little adventure with them. But most of the sort of driver's perspective shots that I use on the channel, like particularly most of the still ones, are actually taken from the front or rear of heritage trains where there's like passenger access to the end. So particularly the diesel electric rail motor, the DERM 58RM, the driver's cab is only a half cab at the front, and passengers can come right up to the front window. So there's a lot of shots that I use taken from that, which it looks like a driver's perspective, but actually it's taken from the passenger compartment. Somebody said, do I ever get special treatment? Am I in the inner train circle? Not really. No, I know a handful of people in the industry, not many, but most of the time I'm just a passenger, and I don't do anything that normal passengers aren't allowed to do. So, and I kind of like it that way. Actually, I think it gives me a better perspective of what it's like as a member of the travelling public. Okay, so a couple more slightly more general questions. Pete on Patreon says, congrats on the 20k. Thank you for the great content. Thank you, Pete, for your support. I'm always interested in the story of the spark of idea, how the spark of idea is developed into its creation. So I mean, it is like in terms of making these videos, one of the hardest things is maintaining a stream of ideas to make videos from. And I sort of have patches where I nearly run out, and then other patches where I've got far too many ideas and it gets kind of frustrating, so I don't actually have time to make them. I'm sort of in that stage at the moment. I've actually got a lot of things I want to make videos about, and I'm just I'm pretty limited in time. Most of my video production is done in short periods when my kids are asleep, or I'm like super tired after work or something like that. So it is pretty limited, but I often have ideas for specific videos if I'm like out and about, and I don't know, I'm either watching something and wondering why something's a certain way, or maybe getting frustrated about something to do with the system that I think I notice and nobody else notices, and that's pretty common. Usually when I notice something like that, I'll sit there and sort of start thinking about what I would like to say about it, and then I'll maybe send myself a reminder to start trying to plot that into a script later on. I should say what's probably not obvious for those of you watching the channel, if you haven't sort of been involved in video production yourself, is that actually by far the biggest part of making these videos is writing scripts. Like, it's probably 80% of the time spent on making the videos is writing the scripts. So actually it's a lot of the skill involved is being able to write, and I think it's one of the few things that I can actually remember learning in high school is how to write proper essays, and actually that's what these scripts are. And it's only really just sort of dawned on me recently that what I'm doing is writing essays basically, and then turning them into a visual thing later on. Do I have any plans for a face reveal? No, not really. It's not that I want to be like secret, but it's more that I'm actually just a massive introvert, and I like to be able to get around without people knowing who I am. The sheer number of people watching the channel, they are definitely, I do walk past people who would know who I am on a fairly regular basis. So particularly, within the Victorian rail enthusiast community, I want to be able to go to like relatively small events without every single person knowing who I am. I did have a funny thing. I was on a train just recently going from Collingwood into the city, and there was a couple sitting there chatting about my Hurstbridge Line video. I thought that was quite funny. So I was sitting 2 seats away from them, listening to them chat about it, which was kind of nice. If you know who you are, hello. All right, what else have we got here? Why did I decide to start making videos? I'm not really sure that I actually decided. So for those of you who don't know, this YouTube channel is actually about 15 years old. No, 17 years old, something. It's quite old. And originally it was just for hosting just video I took of trains. That's all it was. And that's what YouTube was back then, basically. There wasn't much in the way of proper like documentary stuff. So I did that for a very long time. And I think I started watching a few more other channels that were a bit more documentary style and a bit more maybe sort of, critiquing stuff, things like that. Actually, the first sort of videos I made, which were actually sort of talking, explaining stuff, was I made some about my model railway that I had when I lived in Greensborough, and then I made the signalling explainer videos, the early ones, which were just no sound. And then, as you know, I've now made an updated version of the Victorian one. I may do some of the others updated as well. But I think I initially thought that I just wouldn't be very good at doing voiceovers. So I just sort of hung back from doing that for a long time. And then I sort of accidentally discovered that I'm actually okay at it. So, that made that a lot easier. Why did I choose Eltham as my home station? I chose it because I was born there. I wasn't actually born at Eltham Station, but my parents lived in Eltham when I was born. So that's where I grew up. I actually don't live in Eltham anymore. I moved away in 2013, and I moved back and rented in the area for a few years around COVID times, and then I've since moved out again. So I'm still in Eltham fairly often, seeing family and stuff. But no, I live somewhere else on the Hurstbridge Line now, and I've moved to a spot where I'm a bit less reliant on using the car, which is nice. In Eltham, I was quite a long way from the station, so there was a lot of driving involved still. Where I am now, I'm able to get around with my kids without the car most of the time, and actually only have to drive about maybe once or twice a week at the moment, which is really cool and something I definitely wanted to do. How do I know all this info about trains in Victoria? Well, I guess I've been talking to people and thinking about trains for most of my life. I read a lot. I read a lot of magazines and books. I've got basically an entire railway library in my house. A lot of second-hand books I've picked up over the years, and occasionally very expensive first-hand books. And I think I don't know, when I'm traveling around, I keep my eyes open, and I like noticing things. I think, the amount that I know about railways it's not that unusual for someone who's been involved in the hobby for the amount of time that I have been. It's just that most people don't necessarily put all their thoughts into one place and make a video about it. But and it probably is worth considering that, what you hear me talk about is the stuff I know the most about, because that's why I choose to make those videos. So it's not that I know everything, and it's not that I can bring everything up off the top of my head either. A lot of research goes into the scripts. So in terms of knowing things like dates and numbers and things like that, I'm not necessarily good at pulling them out of thin air, but I know where to find them. So I'm good at researching the stuff I need to research. Will I ever make accounts on other social media platforms? I haven't really put much thought into it. It's a possibility, but I sort of kind of got my hands full with everything I'm doing right now. But it's definitely possible in the future. Will I make a video on the Metro Tunnel soon, or when it's opened? I get this question all the time in comments. Well, in fact, a lot of people are like, why haven't you made a video on the Metro Tunnel yet? So most of the videos I make are about stuff that I've got some personal experience with. Either it's an area I've travelled through, or it's something I've thought a lot about. The Metro Tunnel is still basically just a concept for me. It's like most people, I haven't been in there yet. I don't think there's much I can say about it at the moment that isn't just in the public information already. So when it opens, I will definitely have some more, opinions on it, I guess. But at the moment, I think it's a good project. I think it'll be really cool, and I am looking forward to seeing it. But yeah, and the other thing is, like, most of my videos, like, graphically are made by using pictures and videos that I've taken myself, and obviously I have taken none of the metro tunnel yet, except for a few of the entrances under construction. But yeah, we will get there eventually. What did I start making? Narrated explainer videos. Yeah, kind of like I said before, it was just, I just sort of slipped into it semi-accidentally, I think. Yeah, watching other people doing it very well, and thought there wasn't many people doing it in Australia, and I thought I'd give it a crack. Alright, so hang on to a few more general questions here. Matt Austin on Patreon, who I just recently met in real life after knowing on the internet for about 20 years. Hello, Matt. Thinking back to the early 2000s as a young rail fan, what real-world rail developments have you been impressed by, and are there any that you'd hoped for that haven't happened? I think I have been surprisingly impressed by some of the level crossing removal projects. I think, initially I was pretty cynical about the whole thing because, I think a lot of it is really aimed at benefiting road users rather than public transport users, and a lot of the projects actually didn't benefit public transport users very much. But I think most lines when they get a level crossing removal, get a huge disruption and then end up with basically the same service afterwards, with some benefits with maybe improved buses and stuff, but usually it's the main benefit is to road users. But I think what I wasn't really expecting is that I think particularly the elevated stations, the new elevated stations, I think have had a real impact on public perception of the railway, and I think that's a very good thing. I think particularly on the Cranbourne-Pakenham corridor, these big impressive stations soaring up above the suburbs. You go up there, it's all very spacious and light, and you ride a train that soars along across the rooftops. I think it's sort of great in terms of 100% infrastructure renewal, but also I think it has really raised the profile of the railway in the public. So I think I've sort of been surprised by how impressed I am by those. On the flip side, I think most of the stations they've sunk underground are all terrible. There's not really any that I like. So I kind of think they almost have the opposite effect. But I think most people in the public are impressed by those as well. So that's good. Any that I'd hoped for that haven't happened, I've sort of always vaguely hoped for the Doncaster line, but that's just purely hypothetical. It's just not happening. But I think that's the most obvious missing railway line from Melbourne. And I really did think I'd be able to catch a train to the airport by now. But that's still not happening quite. I think we will get there, but it's still going to be a few years away yet. No question, but that 20,000 graphic is top notch. It could be a Taitset jigsaw. That's a good idea. Maybe I will make something like that. What's a completely out there, will never build public transport project you think would be cool? Rail tunnel to New Zealand. Yep, direct express train from Melbourne to Wellington. That's definitely what I'd like. That would be cool. Maybe we could start with Hobart, start slightly easier. What's my favourite video I've made and why? It's a very difficult question. I think I tend to like the ones I've made the most recently because I think my sort of production values have got slightly better every single time. But I'm very pleased with the Broadmeadows Runaway video. I think that came together really well. And obviously it's had a huge public response. We're measuring things in Melburnian units of measurement. It's nearly filled the MCG twice over with the number of people who have watched that video. So that's very cool. And it was a lot of fun, working with the some of the train simulator imagery that Alexander helped produce for that as well. I also quite like the newer Victorian signalling video I did. I think that's quite good. I quite like the Flinders Street clocks one I did as well, which is a little bit more general interest, but it was kind of a fun one to put together. Here's to 30k and beyond, indeed. What are my thoughts on HCMTs and the way Melbourne is heading in terms of rolling stock? Yeah, I think the HCMTs are good. I don't think they're great. As a lot of people have pointed out, they actually feel very cluttered inside. Like given that they're meant to be high capacity, they actually have like a ton of seats still and like a lot of handrails and just stuff through, and they feel small inside because there's so much stuff in there. But you know, they're smooth. They're pretty quiet. I think they feel much higher quality than the Siemens and X-Traps. So I think they're a pretty good train. There are still things I don't like about them. I think the seats should be more comfortable. I don't like how the window's too high up, just like on the Siemens. But I also think that I think maybe the amount of accessibility on them is like slightly overblown in public conversation, where people make it sound like they're massively more accessible. Like all trains in Melbourne are pretty accessible, so they've got a bit more space for stuff, but so do all Melbourne trains. So, but yeah, and in terms of where it's heading, I will hold my judgment until I get to ride on one of the Extrapolis 2.0s, but I think there's probably better trains out there that we could have got. I mean, potentially even just more HCMTs, maybe like a 6-car version or something for the rest of the network. But fingers crossed, the X-Trap 2s will be a lot better than the X-Trap 1s. So, but yes, I will reserve my judgment on that until I get to see one. Do I think Melbourne should attempt double-deckers again? I think that Melbourne should not necessarily attempt double-deckers on the suburban network, because there are benefits to single-deckers in terms of passenger flow and stuff like that, and you're better off just having more single-deck trains. I do think that double-deck trains are actually much better suited for like longer commuter runs. Think stuff like, Bacchus Marsh, Kyneton, Geelong, that sort of thing. It's also my opinion that all those sorts of lines should be electrified. So I think a fleet of double-decker sort of interurban trains, like what New South Wales has, would be excellent for that kind of thing. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if one day we do that. But I don't think it will ever happen on the electrified suburban network again. What would be my dream tram route extension? I would like to see the 86 extended to South Morang Station, not as like an alternative route to the city from South Morang, but as a just for more like local travel out on that part of town. I also think it would be cool if there was a branch off the 86 that went down through Latrobe Uni to McLeod Station. Maybe you could run like McLeod to South Morang as a separate route, kind of like the 82. I also think that the 48 should be extended to Doncaster right now, tomorrow. That would be pretty easy and good. I'd love an extension of the 82 down Brunswick, maybe along the inner circle and connect to Clifton Hill. Oh, yeah, I think that would be really cool. I think the inner circle is interesting because like it actually serves a really good value now as like a shared path, and like kind of linear park, which it is now. But I think that you could like delicately integrate a tram alignment with that, and it would work quite well. SRL is too far. Yeah, I basically agree on that as well. How much power does a train use? What are the specs of the electric motors? How many motors? It's not something I know a huge amount about. When it comes to like electrical equipment and stuff, that's something that sort of, no matter how much I read about it, sort of bounces off and goes straight over my head. But and there's actually surprisingly little specific information about it on the internet. If hopefully somebody can point me somewhere on this, but I'm pretty sure, and I can't actually remember where I know this from, but the traction motors underneath a ComEng M car are about 150 horsepower each, and there's one on each axle of the M car, so that's about 600 horsepower for one ComEng M car. There are 4 M cars in the set, so that's about 2,400 horsepower for a 6-car ComEng. I don't know what that is in kilowatts, but someone can look that up. So yeah, hopefully I might be able to work that out from there. But if anyone does know a bit more about how to answer that question in a better way, please do so in the comments down below. All right, so this is Micah, whose channel name, which you should check out on YouTube, is Railforth, which is, I think it's the Welsh word for railway. If I could bring back anything railway related, line station, train, tram, anything, what would it be? I've sort of got a long list of ways I could answer this. I think the outer circle, bring back the outer circle would be cool. Again, it's a tricky one because actually the way that the land is being used now is quite good, but I'm not sure that the SRL is really going to fill the same sort of role. It's in a different place, but I think in terms of in the suburban area, I think that is something. It would never be like a super busy line, but I think it would provide some really good connectivity between the eastern lines and provide some alternative routes to the city when there's disruptions, which is something we just don't have in Melbourne compared to like Sydney, where there's lots of that sort of thing. But if we look out in the country, like there's a few branch lines. I think people tend to think that the branch lines were all worthy of closing. I just don't think that's true. I think the Bright line could be reopened. I think particularly in summer, there's a ton of traffic out to Bright, and I think that's a busy enough corridor that it would justify a return of a rail service. Again, difficult questions about displacing the rail trail that's now very popular there, but that's a discussion for another time. And same deal with Hillsville and Warburton. I think they would both be lines that it would be very cool to bring back, and there would definitely be a demand for. I think if you can justify having the Stony Point line open, you can justify Hillsville and Warburton. And we'd have to find a way, of course, for the Yarra Valley Railway to coexist with that. Question 2. If there was something transport related you really wanted to know and was exposed on WikiLeaks, what would it be? I don't know. There's probably a lot of reasons why various things have been cancelled over the years or not, stuff like that. I would like to know if there's a story behind the fact that the Extrapolis 2.0 contract was basically like handed to Alstom Ballarat without any kind of like tender process or anything. It was like politically very contentious because they wanted to keep that factory open to support a small number of jobs in Ballarat. Local jobs are important, but so is getting a good train for the system. So, I'd like to know a bit more about what happened there. Seems like they just got the contract, no questions asked. If I had the power to make all public transport commuters change one behaviour, what would it be? There are so many different ways I could answer this one, but one of my personal favourites is when you're travelling home in the evening peak, and you get someone making like a loud specifically business related phone call. Like everyone's just like quiet, tired after work, sitting there reading, listening to something, whatever. And some irritating person in a suit jumps on their phone and starts talking loud, important business speak. I absolutely hate it. It really annoys me. I think people need to be much more self-aware when they're travelling on public transport about the amount of noise they make. Don't expect complete quiet, but a little bit of etiquette is nice. Which future Victorian transport project am I most excited for? Probably the airport line. In terms of one that will actually happen, the airport line. I think that will be cool, and I think it's embarrassing that we haven't finished it yet. In my opinion, is it necessary that the comm sets be replaced by 2030? Look, it's a tricky one, and this will be like probably controversial, but I think you should keep trains going as long as possible. The comm engines are made, like the body is made of stainless steel. They'll last forever if you let them, and just keep replacing anything that needs replacing, even if that means like a full replacement of traction equipment, stuff like that. I don't like that we're like slowly ordering new trains and slowly withdrawing old trains when what we really need is more capacity and frequency on the network. I think we should keep all the trains we can that are economically viable. Someone will definitely disagree with me about that, but that's what I think. Live on the Gold Coast now. Well, at least you've got trams up in the Gold Coast. That's good. Why does the Burnley Group have more frequent services on weekends compared to on weekdays? Yes, this is a very interesting one. It's in the off-peak on weekdays. There is only a half-hour frequency to Belgrave and Lilydale, I think, for most of the off-peak. But it's 20 minutes on weekends. I don't know. I can't see a good reason for it. It seems very strange, and half-hour frequency is not good enough for those two lines. So, yeah, interesting, that one. What year did I take my last Comenge on the Hesperidge line? It was in December 2017. I specifically remember catching a Comenge from Greensborough to Clifton Hill. I remember it very clearly because I took a picture of it. It was pretty rare by that stage. Over the next sort of year or so, in 2018, I heard a few Comenges go past on the Hesperidge line, and then that was it. There was basically nothing after that except for one or two test runs. What's the deal with the Bombardier refurb Hitachi and prototype Met Comenge? I think in the late 90s there was like a bit of experimentation of what the best way was going to be to refurbish potentially the Hitachis and the Comenge sets. And I think there was a few trial refurbishments done like in-house and a few other organisations like Bombardier had a crack at it, which, yeah, created some interesting like prototypes, but obviously none of those ones really went anywhere, although they may have informed the actual refurbishments that did happen. What's the history of Jacana Station? It seems like a very bad station and such a random one. Yeah, it is a weird one. It was a later built station. I think it was like a late 50s build. I think it was to do with when they were sort of opening that area up to housing. It probably made a lot more sense before the freeway was there. Like now Jacana is like almost on top of the freeway tunnel, which is like a very weird spot for a station. And its catchment area is probably not that great. But I think it's an interesting station. I don't dislike it, and it is a good spot for watching trains from the footbridge there. Do I think that a small handful of Comenges will be preserved by Elecrail? I don't. It's very sad, but I don't. I think best case scenario is we get a single Comenge car preserved at the Newport Museum. I don't know if there are any steps underway to make that happen. I certainly hope so, but they are very pressed for space down there, and I don't know if Metro would be willing to hand one over. In terms of preserving one operationally, it's, the number of people working on the current historic fleet of electric trains is tiny. It's a tiny handful of volunteers, and they've already got their hands full with the Taitset and restoring swing door 93M. As far as I'm aware, there's no real move on operational restoration of either a Harris or a Hitachi, and if we don't have those, I don't see why anybody would jump towards restoring a Comenge at this stage. And I think there's also like a broader question to be asked about, which eras work well in operational preservation. So something like the Taitset, it has a great public appeal. It's not necessarily because it's old, it's actually because it's really nice. So even if you don't know how old it is, you step onto it and you go, wow, this is incredible. It's like so much detail and just interesting fittings and stuff like that. Whereas sort of to the untrained eye, you step on a Comenge, especially if it can't be like easily backdated. And the average member of the public isn't going to see a drastic difference there from the trains they're normally used to. So if you were going to do it, I would say you'd want to restore it to like 1981 condition and make it really nice. And the Newport Museum has actually had some success with that with their Hitachi car, which has become a really popular exhibit. But statically preserving something is much easier than operationally. What is my worst Metro Trains Yarratrams experience? I suspect you're probably asking about like delays and stuff, but I'm going to go at this from a different angle. My worst experience with Metro is something that's happened lots of times, in that Metro as an organisation, this is not a criticism of individual staff, I'm talking about the organisation, has had a really, really poor attitude towards railway enthusiasts over the years. They sort of inherited these bad policies from Connex about sort of like post 9/11 fear of everything, policies on banning photography at stations, and just really been quite hostile to people who are interested in the network. So I've had it has changed a bit now, and photography is actually allowed at stations again now, except for in the City Loop. Luckily, we don't know anyone that takes pictures down there. But they've never really communicated that change well with staff, and there are still some staff that get really angry and aggressive when they see you carrying a camera at a station, as if you've walked in with, a weapon, or you've started vandalising or something like that. And to be clear, I've never given any of these people any other reason to be concerned about me. I'm always behaving, as you should at a railway station, and being safe and staying in public areas and things like that. There's just a handful of staff out there who see a camera and get very, very alarmed. And it's not really their fault. It's Metro's fault for really poorly communicating that policy to them. So, that's the thing I don't like about Metro. Yarra Trams, I don't really think I've ever had a bad experience with Yarra Trams. Yarra Trams seems to be a much more positive company in my experience, from the perspective of an enthusiast. Same with V-Line, always very friendly. Is there a particular train that I looked for a long time, couldn't find it, and when I gave up a few days later, I found it everywhere? Yeah, I can kind of think of a few times that sort of happened. One thing that comes to mind is the first time I went to New Zealand and I tried photographing trains at Arthur's Pass. I wanted to get a coal train coming up out of the Otira Tunnel. And the whole time I was there, one didn't come, and I was there like on a few different days at a few different times and didn't see a single train come out of the tunnel. And then I was back 7 years later, and I got a ton of them coming out in like really good lighting, got a whole lot of good shots. So yeah, that was something that I wanted to get, but it took me coming back 7 years later to get it. What is the most remote station I visited? I had to think a bit about this one. Technically, probably Wonderbine. It's not road accessible, so in terms of remote, it's not a long way from a city, but in terms of like accessibility remote, I would say Wonderbine. In terms of like furthest from a city, not sure. That's a hard one. What are the best train spotting spots across the network? Currently only been to North Melbourne. Yeah, the new North Melbourne viewing platform's good. I quite like the footbridges between like Flinders St and Richmond. There's like 3 or 4 or 5 different bridges there that all provide like different views, and you obviously get like a ton of suburban trains coming through, as well as a handful of freight trains and V-Line trains. There are lots of other places around the network that are good as well, but I think that's a good one for like a large quantity of trains and like a lot of different views you can get. And I also like, train spotting from places that aren't stations, partly because that issue I mentioned before with staff getting upset about it. Whereas, you can hang out on one of those footbridges for as long as you like. How has the loading gauge gradually changed on Melbourne's network? Why are swing door trains so much narrower than everything else? So I don't think the loading gauge has actually changed very much. There's been a few tweaks to it. Like when the comm engines were introduced, they were slightly too wide, and they were scraping platforms in certain places, so they had to like shave them back a bit. And I think they also had an issue with track centres there. There's been similar problems with the Siemens trains in various places, so there've been like little tweaks to it. But the reason why the swing door trains was narrow, I think, was actually a precaution for if the doors were to swing open while the train was moving, to like minimise the risk of it striking things. And probably specifically if you had 2 swing door trains passing each other, both with open doors, I think it might have been based on trying to avoid the doors hitting each other in that situation. But obviously that was just a bit of a preventative thing, and it still would have been a big problem if you had an open door while the train was moving on a swing door car. There was also some modifications made to loading gauge on the Belgrave and Lilydale lines for running the 4D, the double deck train. But there's sort of much less significant modifications than I think a lot of people think. You'd be surprised how similar in external outline a double deck train can actually be to a single deck train. They're actually a fraction taller. So if you wanted to run double deck trains on other lines in Melbourne, it wouldn't be overly difficult to make those modifications. Are bike racks on buses useful? I think so. Not something I've ever used myself. It is kind of annoying that you can't take a bike on a bus, particularly when those buses are being used for bus replacements, because you can take your bike on the train. But But yeah, it seems like a good policy. What is my favourite Sydney train, and can I do another railway accident video? Favourite Sydney train? Well, obviously V-sets, but they're not really a Sydney train. They're an interurban train. I like the S-sets and K-sets. I like the, the old silver trains. Will I do another accident video? This is something that lots of people have asked me on the Broadmeadows Runaway video. It's not something I'm going to do regularly. There might be one or two others I will do, but the Broadmeadows Runaway is it's like an interesting story. It's not too tragic. Nobody was killed. There's only some minor injuries. Most other railway accidents are not like that. Most other accidents are less interesting and more tragic, so they're just not as well suited to making a video like that. What other Australian transport YouTubers do I recommend? Did any of them inspire me? That's a good question. I actually watch a lot of international stuff, to be honest, but there's a lot of good people in Australia doing stuff. I really like Philip Mallis's videos. I think he does a lot of more general Melbourne history stuff as well. I think they're really good. I think Paul, Transport Vlog up in Sydney, does a really good job. I sort of don't want to list too many, because if I list lots and I miss one or two people, then they won't be very happy. And I've met a lot of those people in person. So, but there are a lot of good Australian transport YouTubers out there. I should say Metro Man Melbourne does some great videos as well. With the new metro tunnel opening, will we need to change trains to go from Sunbury to Pakenham, or will it all be on one train? No, that will be all on one train. There might be some services that don't go all the way. There'll be some that terminate at Westall and some at West Footscray in the other direction. But yeah, there'll definitely be through trains from Sunbury to Pakenham. Any thoughts on Perth's Metronet? Very embarrassing, but I know very little about it. Perth is somewhere I don't know a lot about. It's also the only suburban network in Australia and New Zealand that I've actually never visited. I've actually never been to Western Australia. Hoping to rectify that pretty soon, but yes, unfortunately at this stage I don't have much else to say about it. Thoughts on the Loney report and can it cuts? For those who don't know, Loney report was basically the beaching report of Victoria, where they recommended that you close a bunch of lines, including a significant part of the Hurstbridge line, which, as you all know, I would not agree with. So yeah, that was nuts. And yes, I obviously am not a Jeff Kennett supporter. I actually met him once. He wasn't very friendly. All right. If I had the ability to bring back a stored old electric train to service, what would it be? Probably have to say a Harris, because it's the one type of Melbourne suburban train I have never ridden and probably will never ride, unless one does get restored one day. So yeah, that would be cool. Favourite bus route? Least favourite? What is the worst public transport delay story I have? None of the bus routes that I use regularly, I would say, are going to qualify for favourite, but there is that bus route that goes over the top of Mount Dandenong. I forgot what the number is, but I think that looks pretty cool. I've actually never had to use it, but if you're going to go on like an interesting Melbourne bus route, that seems like it would be a good one. Least favourite, there's this bus route around the like Greensboro, Bundoora area. I think it's the 566. It's like someone just like scribbled on a map. Yeah, I don't like it. Worst public transport delay story. To be honest, I don't think I've ever had one that's been really bad. I've had a few where I've been caught up for a bit, but I've never had one of those ones where I've had to be like, evacuated midsection or anything like that. And I'm not easily bothered by delays either. I'm pretty chilled out. I'm usually pretty happy to just sit there and wait for it to blow over. What can Melbourne learn from other Australian cities? Yeah, as you know, this is sort of a common theme on the channel. I like to compare the way some other cities do things better, and I think particularly Sydney has a lot of things that they just do better than us, and particularly in things like the way that information is presented, wayfinding, stuff like that. PTV just has a lot to learn and about that kind of thing, and I think most other cities do that better than us, and certainly most European cities do it a lot better than us. So yeah, that's definitely something that I would like to see improve. What closed railway line would you bring back? Yes, I did mention a few of those earlier, but I could add one more, maybe the Mansfield line. Why not? Which of these things... Oh, what happened to the pronunciation video? Good question. I took that one down. Well, it's still there. It's just unlisted. I took it down because the comment section was turning into just a massive battleground of really loud, angry, wrong people. This is obviously always a bit of an issue on YouTube. Mostly, to be honest, most of my videos, it's not too much of an issue, but that one really poked people's buttons, it seems. It is possible I'll put it back, but if I do put it back, it'll be with the comments turned off, which is slightly annoying because I think in it I ask for people's suggestions in the comments, which was obviously a bad idea because, yeah, lots of angry people. You know, I sort of want my videos to be at least a bit of a safe space for people. I don't want like massive fights breaking out in the comments, so that's why I took that one down, but I'll think about it. I might put it back later. Which of these things I think is most likely? Stony Point being electrified, Melbourne getting airport rail, high-speed rail appearing in Victoria. I think we will get airport rail. I think it's going to happen, despite the current delay. So I'd say that. Stony Point being electrified, and duplicated. Probably not duplicated, but at the moment the Stony Point line kind of works fine with the sprinters, but that's going to become very annoying in the relatively near future when the sprinters get withdrawn, and then you're going to have to like take a velocity down there. It'll kind of be like not very good use of a 3-car velocity. So it wouldn't surprise me if that is the catalyst for electrifying. So even if the Stony Point line itself doesn't really justify that, I think just the convenience of being able to just extend one train from Frankston down there would probably make it worthwhile. Which Sydney train do I think suits the Melbourne network the best? Well, obviously that's a completely hypothetical question because we can't do that, but it'll have to be a Tangara because it's very similar to the 4D, which we've already run in Melbourne, of course. How do steam locomotives with more than 2 coupled axles negotiate bends? Yes, that is a good question. So basically it's because there is a bit of play between the flanges and the rail head. So, you know, trains can move laterally from side to side on a straight bit of track slightly. It's just that they naturally sit in the middle because of the profile of the wheels. So it just means that as you go around a curve, like the position of the middle driving wheels will be different on the railhead relative to the ones towards the ends. It is a problem sometimes though, and certainly on a lot of like narrow gauge locomotives that have to negotiate really tight corners, they sometimes actually take the flanges off some of the driving wheels, which obviously means you tend to get like a less efficient, you know, use of the driving wheels on tight curves. But yeah, that flangeless driving wheels is a thing. What is my favourite train in the UK? If I could close any station in Melbourne, what would it be? My opinion on V-Line trains should be bi-mode. That's a very diverse question. Favourite train in the UK? I like the 1972 and 1973 tube stock. I know they're getting very old, but they are fun. If I could close any station in Melbourne, I probably wouldn't close any, I don't think. My opinion on V-Line trains, should they be bi-mode? Not at the moment, because the amount of track that V-Line actually shares with the electrified suburban network is actually not very high at the moment. It's basically just like Craigieburn line and the Pakenham line and a bit of the Sunbury line. But as electrification pushes further out into the interurban area, it may well be a good idea to get bi-mode trains. And I will be making a video quite soon talking about this kind of thing actually, so stay tuned for that. I'm seeing a lot of trains coming out of Newport workshops. Any plans for the next open day? Yes, Steamrail will be running their Newport workshops open day early next year, and you should all go because it's amazing. And even if you don't like trains, I suspect if you're this far into the video you probably do, but it's just an amazing piece of architecture and industrial history to look around. What is the purpose of the green and red lights that are in between the carriages on Extrapolis trains? Those lights show the position of the park brake, basically. So Extrapolis trains slow down using rheostatic braking, dynamic braking, and you can hear that as they slow down. You can hear the traction motors slowing the train down. And then the last little bit before they stop is actually done by a tread brake So you'll notice they'll slow down to about, I don't know, 4 or 5 k's an hour, and then you hear that dynamic brake disappear, and then the last little bit is done under friction braking, which is the tread brake, which is also the parking brake. So those lights go from green to red when the tread brake applies, I'm pretty sure. Do I know about the infamous Railway Baby Bandit of Epping? I don't. Please tell us what that is. As part of the LXRP, which stations do you think have improved the most? So improved the most as in going from worst before to best now. I would have to say Rosanna. Rosanna was a pretty bad station before, and it's now a pretty good station. Favourite tram class in Melbourne? B class. They're great. Am I going to do more tram videos? I certainly will. They don't get as many views as trains. There's just not as many people interested in trams. So in terms of like keeping the channel moving, I will sort of spread them out a bit, but I'm not just here to keep the channel moving. I'm here to try and make interesting stuff. So I will definitely be doing more tram videos every now and then. Will I do any more collabs with people like RM Transit? Yeah, very likely. I do chat with Reese quite often, and yeah, I'd say next time he does something relevant to Melbourne, there's a very high chance that we will do that. You're from Amsterdam and surprised that all Melbourne tram routes are operating in mixed traffic. Yeah, a lot of Melbourne's tram routes are in mixed traffic. It is a big problem. It's just a huge network, you know, and the priority hasn't really been there to separate them. So it's slowly happening. I don't know if it'll ever happen completely. It's a big network. It's the biggest tram network in the world. So it takes a long time to get around to fixing these sorts of things. I have been to Amsterdam about a decade ago, and had a good day taking pictures of trams around there. It was fantastic. Obviously that's the main thing everyone goes to Amsterdam for, is to see the trams. So yeah, that's cool. So many people living in Yarra Glen and beyond. Yes, I do think Yarra Glen and Healesville should get their line back. Is it possible for someone to do the 24-hour challenge, travelling every station on the network? I wouldn't say every station, I'd say every line. Like, can you travel the length of every line in 24 hours? I'm pretty sure you can. People used to do it quite a lot. I think it's possible, but I'm kind of interested in the theory of planning it. I don't think I actually enjoy doing it, just because Melbourne suburban trains are not comfortable enough to spend that much time on. Would you electrify the Stony Point line? I sort of covered that before. What suburban lines would you reinstate? Yeah, I mean, like St Kilda and Port Melbourne, like, yes, but not at the, you know, they're doing fine with trams. Like, I think it was better as heavy rail, but just leave them as trams, that's fine. Mornington, yes, Mornington would be good. Again, we'd have to find a way for the Mornington Tourist Railway to coexist there. Definitely my favourite Aussie transport vlogger, thank you very much. What's my day job? Yes, I covered that one. Notice you tend to shy away from mentioning specific governments that have come up with or scraps on projects. Do I do this to avoid? Yeah. I don't think I make a conscious decision to avoid mentioning specific governments. It is partly to avoid flame wars in the comments, because as soon as you mention any specific politician, that just like ruins the comment section, basically. It's not that I think it's insignificant. I just think it's maybe detail that's not really needed in most of the videos. And if people want to know who was in power, then they can look it up, sort of thing. I am very interested in politics, and I pay a lot of attention to it, especially, you know, social and environmental issues, and obviously transport. But yeah, I tend not to try and make it too political in the videos, mostly to avoid the fighting, but also just to stay on topic. But anyone who's seen my depiction of Jeff Kennett at the start of the split video, that's probably the most political comment I've made so far. Eltham needs a refurb. Yeah, Eltham Station has had some upgrades, but mostly to just like the staff areas. The rest of it hasn't changed much. I'd actually just like to see more better pedestrian access to it. Australia seems like a perfect candidate for high-speed rail. Yes, I do think high-speed rail will be viable, or is viable, in Australia. It's so difficult. It's almost become like a meme of, like, whenever it gets suggested, people talking about how it's like just a silly pipe dream thing. But even if it isn't right now, by the time we finish building it, it will be. And yeah, I think East Coast high-speed rail would be great. There's a quite good video made by a channel called City Moose talking about this, where they say that even despite the viability questions with high-speed rail itself, we also need to be upgrading the current line to a much better standard, and sort of aiming for that kind of like UK standard of not proper high-speed rail, but sort of up towards sort of 200 kilometres per hour. You could shave a huge amount of time off Melbourne to Sydney by doing that, and ultimately we ended up with both of those things. High-speed rail for intercity trips, which is actually for competing with the air, and a better local service as well. That would be really good. What would be my proposal to fix the dismal public transport in suburban areas not covered? Yeah, I mean, build the Doncaster line, tons of better buses. What do I think about train replacements like the Hyperloop? So like the Hyperloop specifically was a scam. Like it wasn't physically possible. So definitely not Hyperloop. There are like kind of some other like gadgety barn type things that have a place in some cases, like in sort of like internal airport transport, stuff like that. But generally, we've already solved how to do good transport, and the answer is rail. One of my experiences traveling by train overseas, often very good, but I do think when people travel, they often see the best parts of transport networks overseas. So most people like think that everywhere else is better than them, but I have travelled around in Europe a bit, and it is all very good. You're saying that Deutsche Bahn is not great service. Probably depends what you compare it to. I think overall, I know there are issues, but overall Germany does have very good public transport. From my very brief experience travelling through there. What is my opinion on Go Transit in Canada? Looks pretty cool. I haven't been there, but I believe they're moving towards electrifying some of their routes, which will be great, and making it less peak centric. I think they need more off-peak service. What is my opinion on emergency horns? Yes, that is the best thing that horns are for, is in use in an emergency, and I think they're more useful in emergencies when they're not also used for everything else. Will we see more of my brother's music on the channel? Yeah, definitely. Haven't quite worked out exactly when or what for, but we're definitely looking for some opportunities to do that. Kian has so much talent. Yes, he does. I'll put a link to his thing down in the pinned comment as well. What lines do I think the X-Trap 2 will run on? They're currently saying Craigieburn and Upfield. I think they kind of mentioned Frankston, and then they pulled that again, but it wouldn't surprise me if that does spread beyond the scope of that in the future. How does the announcement system at stations in Melbourne works? Is it a phone line? Basically, yes. I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure it is phone based. I know that it is. If you have the number, you can call and talk out of the talking brick at the station. But yes, I don't really know much about the technical part behind that. Do I see the need for faster regional rail services? Yes, but I think it'd be better to focus on more frequency, more duplication. I think, a lot of them are already pretty fast. Do I think that ordering more velocities is the right move? No, I don't. I think velocities are really good at what they were originally meant to do, travelling in the sort of interurban commuter area. But they're not good long-distance trains, and they're not good suburban trains, and at the moment they're kind of doing all of those things. Again, I am about to make a video about this. I would also like to see a lot of the interurban area electrified and get some proper interurban electric trains. Will I make a video on different express patterns? Yes, I've actually started writing one, and more about the way that express trains function in Melbourne. It is not yet finished, but I will hopefully make that eventually. If the ex-trampolines were to depart Melbourne for good, what would be a great replacement? Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of good rolling stock design coming out of Europe, but actually something locally built, the A-City EMUs that Adelaide is getting, that we're actually building for them in Melbourne, which are very closely based on the Velocity body design. They were good, and I'd like to see some of those here. There's a Sunbury line commuter. What are my thoughts on the Metro Tunnel? Yeah, I think I've sort of covered that a bit already, but yeah, it'll obviously be annoying for some people where it might send you through further from where you wanted to go in the CBD, but equally there'll be other people that it'll get them closer to where they want to go, so I think that will sort of balance out. That's my favourite video that I've made. I sort of covered that before. What some big projects I have in the works. A lot of people ask about when I'll do another line explainer, like my Longhurst Bridge Line one. Yes, there is another one coming. It's probably about half made, but I won't reveal which line it is just yet. I think I did reveal it on Patreon, but won't publicly reveal that just yet. But yes, they do take a long time to make these ones. If I was a transport minister, what would I do? I would allow proper heritage trams to run on the Melbourne network again, like the ones from the museum. Where's my favourite place to see trains? Yeah, I sort of said that before. Will I come to Zigzag in the Blue Mountains? Yes, definitely. Last time I went to Zigzag was just before it closed in about 2010. So I'm very excited to go there again. Lots of construction of light rail over the years in Sydney from Melbourneite. Yeah, great that New South Wales is building a lot of light rail. I think they should stop stuffing around with all the various alternative power systems and energy systems. Proper overhead is great, and they should just do that. Like in Melbourne, it's much simpler, and I don't know, people seem to think that overhead wires are ugly, but actually once they're up, no one notices them, and it's just way better and cheaper and more standardized than going for all those various other things that they've used. Thank you very much for those kind comments. Why do some Burnley Group trains not run around the loop? It's probably just a capacity thing, but yeah, there are a few local trains, I think like Blackburns and stuff, that just go straight out from Flinders Street. Small things I think other countries could learn from Australia. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I think a lot of Australians are very self-deprecating when it comes to our network, but we actually do some things really well. I think that the Australian model for suburban rail is really good, and particularly North America could learn a ton from us about that kind of thing. I've practically convinced you to become a train driver. Good on you. That'll be awesome. Will I do more line explainers? Yes, they are coming. The Hurst Bridge line video took me 7 months to make, so that gives you some idea. What is my favourite line of all... Oh, sorry, favourite train of all time, excluding the Taitset. Comenge, I like the Comengers. Maybe I will rival the big man himself, Iron Transit and view count. I'm coming for you, Reese. What is my opinion of the low speed that regional trains operate compared to their listed max speed? So there's sort of two reasons why V-line trains may not run at full speed out in the countryside. One of those is because they have to stop at stations, and there just isn't enough time to get fast in between stations. There's nothing really you can do about that. It's important to stop at stations. And the other reason is that the network still has a lot of single track, so often at least one train will have to slow down to go into a crossing loop to pass another train or to wait line clear at the entrance to a single track. I don't think it matters too much that there are sections out there that aren't that fast. It annoys me a lot more that there are a lot of very slow junctions and things close to the city, like the junction at Deer Park is really slow, same with Sunshine, and all the track from like South Kensington into Southern Cross is really slow. There's a really good video by Gareth Dennis, who does the Rail Natter podcast in the UK, where he talked about, I think the video is just called How to Make Trains Fast Go Faster, something like that. I'll put a link to it in the pinned comment. The basic gist of it is you can save a lot more time by making very slow bits a bit faster than you can making pretty fast bits a lot faster. So it's much cheaper and easier to fix little bits of low speed than it is to get like sustained long speed running out in the country. Which Australian cities can I see having light rail networks in the future? Perth and Brisbane. Brisbane already has pretty good buses, so you could argue about maybe converting some of those routes to trams. I'd also say Hobart. Hobart should definitely have trams again. Okay, so I know this is getting very long, but we're almost there. This is going getting towards the end now. A lot of questions about how I would improve the network. What major projects I'd like to see going in the future, stuff like this. I don't know. They're all sort of things that take a very long time to explain, but we have been very focused on big infrastructure stuff, and like I would like to see, the airport line. I'd like to see the Doncaster line, which is not moving at the moment. Melbourne Metro Tunnel 2, they should be starting on that already. But also I would just like to see a lot more work done in terms of actual provision of service. We have a lot of lines now that could be running a much better service without any changes in infrastructure. Nearly all of the lines have some example of this, but places like the Craigieburn line could be running a 10-minute frequency right now. I'm talking sort of off-peak. Most of the actual peak timetables are pretty good, but more frequency in the off-peak and late at night. Easy fixes. We just probably need to train up a lot more drivers, but again, something they should be working on right now. And I think we could make a lot more use of the infrastructure we already have. A lot of the lines have like a 40-minute frequency until 10 a.m. on a Sunday. It's ridiculous. A lot of stuff like that. And I'd also like to see big improvements to the bus network. It's called bus reform, fixing our current not very good bus network and making it a lot better connections with trains, stuff like that. And a lot of that is possible, again, without serious infrastructure. It's all about just better planning. What I think is the biggest current obstacle to future development of Melbourne's public transport, pig-headedness and car culture. Yeah. So there's a lot of other questions here that I would like to answer in more detail, but it would just take too long. We've been going for well over an hour already. So, I will make some videos in the future about some of my ideas for expanding the network. What do I think about a ring road of train line? That's basically the SRL. The SRL is one of those things. If they build it, cool, it'll be fine. But I just think there's much more important projects they could be working on, and I will be astounded if it gets beyond phase one. I reckon they'll probably finish phase one, and that'll be it. I'd be very surprised if they don't. If they do the rest, I think they should have started with the western part, where there's much more lacking transport than in the east. In terms of other options for the airport line, I actually think the sort of cheap option of just building like a branch line from Broadmeadows would have been pretty good, and they could have done it ages ago, and it would be fine. It wouldn't be the best line in the world, but hey, I would use it. I think it would attract a lot more traffic than the Skybus does, and it would have much bigger capacity, and it'd be much easier, and it would also benefit people along the Broadmeadows line. So a few more requests on doing line explainers. A few for Pakenham. Lots of people ask me about Frankston. Yeah, look, there are always going to be long-term projects that happen in the background behind other stuff. They require a huge amount of work and just time. It's just time writing it mostly. I will, let's see if I can finish doing every line before the airport line opens. There we go. I don't know if I can do that. Let's see. I'll give it a go. Quite a few people asking about more tram videos. I sort of covered that earlier, but specifically a lot of people ask, can I do an explainer on the different types of trams and where they run and that sort of thing, similar to the ones I've done for the trains. I probably will at some point. It's definitely up there on my list. In some ways, it's kind of like the reasons why the trams run in certain places are a bit less interesting than the rail. It doesn't have as much of a story behind it. It's usually just that whatever was convenient at the time, and they're like allocated to a certain depot which runs certain lines. But anyway, I will do it, definitely. Video on the runaway train was very interesting. I don't suppose there are any other similar incidents. Well, there are, and there is one that I will make a video about soon. Can I do a video on Maryborough Station? Maybe. I reckon there's probably some other people out there that might be better suited to do that. Maybe Will James will do it. I think a Will James video on Maryborough Station would be good. So make sure you go and subscribe to Will James just in case he does. Will I do a video on Melbourne's buses? I probably will eventually. Like trams that have less people interested, there's even fewer people interested in buses. But it is an interesting topic. I would like to do a video. I am actually making a video at the moment about, which actually it might go live before this video does, but there's a video coming about bus replacements specifically, but on the bus system in general, I will do that at some point. Make a video judging, which has, Sydney versus Melbourne. Yeah, I did have that on my list, but actually Shareth from Building Beautifully and Philip Malice just made such a video, or 2 videos actually, and I think they did a pretty good job. That probably came up after you left that comment, I think, but yeah, for the moment, that is your definitive Sydney versus Melbourne video to watch. L Mainline, yes, I'll definitely consider L Mainline in the future, but yeah, the short story is it's run as a 3-car shuttle from Camberwell during the off-peak, but they run through trains during peak hours, just partly to get extra trains running on the inner part of the line as well. Electrification extensions, yes, something I'm very passionate about, both as a railway enthusiast and as a environmentalist. I would like to see most of the interurban area electrified pretty soon. I think we will get like Melton, Wyndham Vale, Wallen, that kind of thing pretty soon. But I don't think it's the right thing to continue treating those as get longer and longer suburban lines. It's time for proper interurban electrification with proper interurban electric trains. Workings of inner city freight corridors, yeah. I might do that. There's sort of not a huge amount to it at the moment. I did the Kensington Grain video, but yeah, I might do a more general one covering some of the other stuff. Standard broad gauge development, yeah, that is also a good one. It's such a big story though, it's probably not something I'd go into too much detail about, but the author John Wilson, who wrote the Overland Social History book, which I hope you all have, he is currently working on a very comprehensive book about the development of rail gauge in Australia, which I have made some small contributions to, and I think he's taking pre-orders for that as well. Again, I'll put some information down the bottom. Yes, lots of people are asking about V-Line videos, that is true, and I do have 2 videos about V-Line on the way. One will be sort of a fleet explainer, much like I've done for the Suburban Network, and there'll be another one a bit more generally about what I think about V-Line as a separate entity to Metro. If we ignore Victoria entirely, it's my favourite railway network in Australia. I always like visiting Sydney. Sydney's great. Alright, a lot of questions about favourite train, favourite tram. I already said B class for favourite tram and Comenge for train, but if I'm riding out in the country, definitely an NSET. Give me an NSET any day. In terms of New South Wales, I think VSETs are awesome. They're getting a bit old and run down, but they're just a really well-designed train. Also, a lot of people asking me to rank every line and or every train in Melbourne and or Sydney. Definitely don't have the time to do that here, but I think I make my opinions about these things pretty clear on a lot of them. It's my favourite country in terms of railways outside Australia. Switzerland, yeah, amazing place. I've been there twice. Really amazing transport network. And some of my videos I've taken photos of trains in Great Britain. What did I find interesting whilst there? Yeah, I'm very interested in railways in Britain. I'm very interested in the tube, as I mentioned earlier. The Glasgow subway was awesome. That was a really, really cool thing to visit. In terms of mainline stuff, I like the Intercity 125s. They're really cool. I like a lot of the Southern Third Rail stuff. I think the Class 455, hopefully that's right. Hopefully I'm not admitting to liking something embarrassing there, but yeah, I liked those. Yeah, would love to go back to the UK soon. Do I have interest in other forms of public transportation? Yeah. I sort of have a passive interest in aviation. I can sort of identify most commercial aircraft, and I like flying and stuff. It's just not a hobby that I really pursue actively, but I am kind of interested. I like ferries as well. Ferries are cool. Do I like any transportation outside of Australia? Yes, I pay a lot of attention to what's going on in New Zealand, also the UK and Switzerland, France. I'm a member of the Swiss Railway Society, which is a UK-based English-speaking society for people who like Swiss railways. which they publish a magazine, which is really good, because it can be hard to find English information on Swiss railways. If anyone who likes New Zealand railways, you must subscribe to the Linesider magazine. Really excellent magazine. My favourite suburb in Melbourne, very difficult. I don't think I can really give an accurate answer to that, but I like Montmorency a lot. I like the way the shopping strip kind of like leads down to the station, and there's lots of nice cafes and stuff there. Favourite part of the CBD, I like hanging around Bourke Street Mall, mostly just for watching trams. I don't have any interest in any of the shops there or anything, but it's kind of nice. Best HSP place in Melbourne. Sorry, it's not something I actually get very often. I think there's a lot of good ones in Fitzroy though. Do I prefer V-sets or commengers? I look there, they're very different trains for very different things, but in terms of like a really well-designed train, I love the V-sets, they're very cool. Favourite cancelled or planned Melbourne transport project? Doncaster. What is my favourite railway crossing in Melbourne? Wow. Allendale Road, between Eltham and Diamond Creek. Opinion on lime scooters? I don't have a strong opinion on them. They seem useful to some people. I personally don't really use them. I just like to walk everywhere. But they definitely fill a role. They're always going to be limited while there is not good bike infrastructure. Like the way they get used on a lot of roads is pretty dangerous. If there was better bike infrastructure, that would be less of a problem. And I do wish people would stop parking them in insane places, like blocking the entrances to stations and stuff like that. But overall, yeah, good concept. What country has the best railway apart from Australia? Back to Switzerland again. What country, city, other than Australian ones, metros do you like the most or most impressed by? It looks like your thumbnail picture there is a Hong Kong MTR metro come all set. I have been to Hong Kong and I was very impressed with the Hong Kong metro. It's really the only like Asian metro that I've probably visited, but yes, incredible place. And I do hope to go back there at some point. What are my preferred train doors? I assume we're talking Melbourne suburban trains here. The common ones were good when they had the proper handles. Now they've got rid of those. They suck. The HCMT ones suck. The buttons are really stupid and don't work properly. So it's a tie between X-Traps and Siemens. Both have the most usable doors at the moment. Favourite train route outside Australia? Well, we're going to Switzerland and say most of the RHB network, basically, to the layman, that's the Glacier Express. The area around the Landwasser Viaduct and Philosopher and stuff like that, it's all really incredible. Favourite non-Hurstbridge line? It's a good question. Maybe Sandringham. I like Sandringham. I like Upfield. I like the Craigieburn line. I like most of them, to be honest. Favourite place in the city? It's a tough one. I did say Bourke Street Mall earlier. I just like hanging around up on Swanston St and stuff and, watching the busiest tram corridor in the world go past. But actually I like a lot of our parks, like the Edinburgh Gardens and Fitzroy Gardens, all those. That's one of the strongest things that Melbourne has, I do believe. Actually, I'm going to give a random shout out to a non-rail location, and that is the Royal Exhibition Building. I think that's an incredible building, surrounded by parkland and obviously easily accessed by tram as well. Vital question. What is my favourite? I'm so glad I left this one almost for last for such an important question. What is my favourite choice of hot food, beverage, snacks for a healthy day watching trains? You can't really beat the nice pie from a country bakery, There's a few like reasonable cafes and things around like the Flinders Strait Concourse and stuff, but if I'm out in the country, it's definitely going to be a pie from the local bakery. Would I say the Hurstbridge line is the best line? Not necessarily. It's the most interesting line, I think, and it's the most scenic line. But in terms of operations, it's not the best line. But I like it because I like travelling on it rather than it actually being perfect. Okay, I think that is it, and I do apologise if I've missed anyone. I almost certainly will have, because it's a little bit of a nightmare organising all of these comments into an order that I could sort of make sense of. But thank you so much all of you for supporting the channel, even just by watching it. If you'd like to support it on Patreon, I thoroughly suggest that you check that out. I do put a lot of updates on what I'm working on and some behind the scenes videos, and yeah, you get to watch the videos a bit earlier than everyone else. It's a lot of fun running this channel. It is a lot of work as well, but I'm doing it because I enjoy it rather than anything else. So that's where we are today. I probably won't do another one of these for a while, because I think I've just answered a lot of questions already. But yes, stay tuned. Lots more videos coming up. I hope you enjoyed the video that's gone along with these questions. I actually don't know what it is right now because I haven't recorded it yet. I'm talking in the past. But hopefully it was very entertaining and or nice to watch. So once again, thank you all for following the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks very much.